Hello everyone and welcome to our first ever TeacherCast webinar. My name is Jeff Bradbury, and before we go any further, I want to take a moment to say thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to be with us. We certainly hope to make today's session as informative and enjoyable as possible. We also want to begin today by saying thank you to our guests Dan Wood and Naomi Pierce for helping us set up this, and thank you for having them participate in the show. Dan, how are you doing today?
Hello, it sounds like we're going to have a really fun time here.
Thanks for being here, Dan. Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, so I am the president of Corellia Software. We're a Mac software business. We've been around since 2001, and our flagship product is Sandvox, as you mentioned, an app for the Mac that helps you build a website. And it's used by all kinds of people, small business owners and individuals and organizations and, of course, educators.
Thanks, Dan. We're glad that you could join with us today and do this webinar for us. Just to give everybody a little bit of an idea of what's going on, Dan's going to be showing us how to create an amazing website in under an hour using Sandbox. And I'm also going to have a chance to interact with you on the chat log, so please feel free to bring your questions in. Certainly be asking Dan some of these great questions as we go. Now, Dan, you've been working with Sandbox for a while. Tell us a little bit about the history of Corellia.
Okay, well, Corellia has been around since 2001, but it was around 2004 or so where we realized that we really wanted to help solve a problem, and that is that building a website, especially one that works well across different browsers, is really hard. The HTML and CSS technologies that are required are not for the faint of heart. And we realized that many people are just way too busy to have to learn how to do all this, and we wanted, people want to be able to focus on their business and their life, and in the case of educators, on their teaching. So Sandbox has become a great tool for all kinds of people to build their websites, and we've seen teachers in schools. We've seen a lot of ways that people have been building beautiful websites, and actually I can show you some of these examples if you want.
Sure, we'd love to see them.
Okay, let's I'm going to open up a bunch of tabs here in Safari. And I'm just going to point out some example websites. So this is just a wide variety of websites we're going to be taking just a whirlwind tour through. I'm just going to point out a few features of each of these, but you'll see there's multiple pages along that you can choose from along the top. Some content, interesting content in the sidebar. I'll switch to another one here. Here's a school with a beautiful slideshow with images that automatically switch from image to image. A nice little overview of the school. Here's an English teacher's class with some beautiful black and white photography and color. Here's a music teacher's website. Lots of text and hyperlinks in this one. Mrs. B's website from a high school, and lots of things. She's featuring the Mars Curiosity, engineering, physics, and so on.
Now, Dan, I noticed while looking through all these websites, they all look different, and they can really be used for any teacher, any subject, and really in any situation possible out there for the classroom educator.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety in what you can build. Here's a Christian Academy in Fresno, just some basic. There's a little integration with Facebook there. A little QuickTime movie. They have some weather. Montessori school. They have their links over on the side there. This one has a fun name, but it's also a teacher's site. Here's one in French with a very colorful title there. A violin teacher. And I think that's where we started. So there's just a quick tour of some example websites that we found that people built using Sandbox. And so what I was hoping to do was to actually walk you through Sandbox, launch the application, give you a little guided tour of the application itself, and then I want to sort of switch gears and actually show in a little more detail another website that a teacher used Sandvox to build. And then I want to actually show that website, but from Sandvox, from the Sandvox point of view, and we'll navigate through the Sandvox document that built that website. So sort of a top-down approach. And then I want to go as a demonstration for building a website to sort of go, sort of switch gears back to the original site we started, sort of from the bottom up, and build up a new website, a document, and I'll be demonstrating some interesting features of Sandvox as we, just with example content, but that'll give you, all the listeners here, an example of how you might put content into a website. So why don't I go ahead and launch Sandvox here. And it comes up with a nice welcoming window. And in our case, what we're going to do is create a new site. And the first thing that it shows us is a very large grid with a whole bunch of thumbnails of different designs that you can choose from. Sandvox comes with about 60 or so designs, and actually several of those designs have multiple variations in colors. So I'm going to choose one here called Earth and Sky that's going to match the example website we'll be showing later. I'll choose the blue variation. And it has opened up, as you can see, essentially the starting point of our website. It's just a web page, a single page website, and with showing the template that it comes up with. Let me take you on a little tour of what's in this window here. So the main area here we're looking at, we just call the web editor. And this is a look at your website, and it's not really a simulation of your website. It's actually using the exact same technology called WebKit that Apple uses in Safari and is also used in several other web browsers as well. So what you see is really going to be what you get. Up at the top here is the standard Mac toolbar with a number of quick access to a number of things that you're probably going to want to be using as you're building your website for adding new pages and editing your website, publishing it, and bringing up other windows for helping tweak your website. Over on the left is what we call the Site Navigator. And this is essentially an outline of your website, all the pages on it. And in this case, it came with just one page initially, but to add a new page is going to be very simple. Let me just do that now. So I'm going to click up here on the new pop-up menu, and this has a number of presets to choose from. I'm just going to, for now, just create a simple empty text page. And notice how that's created a second object, a second page, and that's even showing up automatically here in the menu of pages that you can navigate to. So now we have a web page with not very much on it, but it has 2 pages. Then down at the bottom of the window is what we call the page details area, and this is information about this currently selected page that is not, it's information that's not visible on the page, but it's still fairly important, especially if you want your website to be found with Google. So that's useful to have. So we put that right there front and center. And then finally, I want to show you one of the utility windows we can open up here, the inspector. And the inspector has a number of segments across the top. They might be familiar if you've used other applications such as Keynote and Pages from Apple. Essentially, we can use it to tweak and inspect properties of the document or the currently selected page, or across the way here, other properties of what's on the page. So I'll get this out of the way for now. We don't need this.
Hey Dan, can you talk to us a little bit about changing the design? What if instead of the blue we wanted to turn it to another color or even a different design?
Sure, that's really easy. You can change the design really at any time. I'll just click over here, bring up the design chooser again, and I can just change it to a completely different design here. For example, I'll go ahead and change it back to what we had before. And when you change that, it's changing every page on the entire site all at once. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, before I start adding a little content, I just want to point out some aspects of the web page itself, just so that we're kind of familiar with the terminology. Just this area at the top here, we're calling the header. It has the title of the website and so on. Then we have navigation. And then down here in this area is just the body, and this particular web page has a sidebar showing, so it has this badge that we can keep, or we remove it if we want, and add new content over to the sidebar. And then at the bottom we have a footer. You might have your copyright information or any kind of closing thoughts you might want to have. That's shown at the bottom of every web page. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of content to this website, so you can see how easy it is to essentially just type in your website. So I'll change that. I'll maybe edit this and call this welcome. And since this website is going to have a bit of a geography theme, let's just call it geography class. So just very simple to just type in what you want. What you see is what you get. If you've brought in your content, if you have content from something else, let's say you've been typing it into Pages or Microsoft Word or a text editor, certainly you can paste in your text. So I'm going to open up from over here. I have a little text file. I'll just copy this, and then I'm just going to paste this right after my initial sentence here. As you can see, that just pasted right in.
Hey Dan, what happens if you have text that you're trying to import or copy that's already been pre-formatted?
Right. So if you have a web page, or sorry, if you have a document with text that's bold and italic and different fonts, yes, that will be preserved as you paste that in. So one thing that you're going to be wanting to do probably when you're building up a website is to be putting in links, hyperlinks from one page to another. So I'm just going to backtrack for a minute, and let's call this other page here grade reports. And going back to my home page, I want to now put in a link to that web page, to that other page on my site. So let's select the text grade reports, and in the toolbar choose create link, and that's going to bring up the inspector, in this case the link inspector. Now I want to link this not to an external URL like example.com, but I want to link it to a page on this site. So I'll choose that. And now there's this target icon under the mouse pointer. I'm going to drag this out, and you see that it's following my mouse, and I'm going to drop it on the grade reports, that other page that I want to link to. And now it has created a hyperlink from the home page to that grade reports page. So now if I were to click on that, it would take me to the grade reports
Hey Dan,
page.
you did that really quickly. Could you show us one more time? How did that bullet turn into the hyperlink for us?
Sure. Let's make a new page. Let's say maybe we want to do something with field trips. Open the inspector. Actually, I'll just choose create link. So if I wanted to go to an external URL, let's say another website, I could type in that here. But in this case, I want to go to a page on this site. So again, I'm just grabbing that, dragging it down. There's a little line. It's kind of hard to see against the blue background, but there's a little snaky line that's showing you the connection. Drop it on that page in the site outline, or in the site navigator. Let go, and now it's linked to that other page. Okay? Sure. All right, let's bring in an image. It's always useful to have more than just text on your website. So I have a photo here on the desktop of my other screen. I'm just going to drop it into the body area here. And there it is, a beautiful oil refinery. As beautiful as they can get. I'll maybe resize that a little bit. I can align it, but let's keep it in the middle here. And I'm going to do one thing with the inspector to make this a little bit more appropriate for a geography site. So using the inspector, I want to change the appearance of this banner up here at the top of the website, and that's going to change it on all of the pages of the site. So I have the document inspector. I'll click over on the appearance tab. There's a lot of things here you can tweak that you're usually not going to have to worry about, but one thing that's very handy is to change the banner to an image fill. And I have a nice picture of Crete here I will put in. And notice how it has changed it now to a nice satellite image. So that's a little more appropriate for a geography class. And later, I want to get into adding a lot more content to this website and a lot more interesting objects on the page. But what I'd like to do now is to sort of switch gears to go for kind of a top-down approach and take a look in detail at an existing website, an educational website, and how that's corresponds to the document in Sandbox. So I'm going to click the yellow button here and minimize this document, get it out of the way for now. And let's go to this website, published on the web. And I want to thank Mr. Chuck Drazel of Napa, California, who has he's been a Sandbox user for a long time and has 3 different classroom websites that he's built with Sandbox. And he was kind enough to let us use his material as for demonstration. And so we're just gonna I'm gonna take you a little whirlwind tour here of this website. So as you can see, it looks similar to the one we started to build because it has the same design and the banner that I chose. It has across the top several different pages that you can navigate to, and in fact there's a pop-up here so that you can navigate to a particular geography unit along the way. And of course, just like any website, I would click on a link and it would take me there. So you'll notice there is text and graphics, hyperlinks to other websites. Over on the sidebar, just a nice little picture, but also some interesting things that came over from Google. Also some news releases, so it's keeping current news going on here. And here's his footer down there. It's kind of cute. He also has a multiple audio files available on his website. He has what he calls the document locker, a number of PDFs for handouts and so on. Links, interesting off-site links. He has a form to contact him, and that's not putting his email address, but actually just someone would fill that in and enter their message there.
You know, the one thing I want to mention about all these websites is that not only do they look good on a desktop, on a PC, on a Mac, but they look amazing on a tablet device, from an Android to an iPad, and they even look great looking at them from an iPhone screen.
Right. We made sure with our websites that this empty space over on the left and the right isn't wasted on an iPhone. It zooms right into the main content. So this final page here you're looking at is a sitemap, which is a particular kind of page from Sandbox, and it's kind of a nice sense, gives you a nice sense of just how rich and complex and large his website is. And this is the smallest of the 3 websites he sent me. His social studies classes are even bigger. So we've seen Mr. Drazel's site from Safari. Now let's take a look at it in Sandbox. So I'm closing that out, and I have on my desktop over here the Sandvox document. That's opening that up. And you may think it looks a little similar, and that's because it really is. So here's the home page, and it has the same kind of content. This Earth Observatory image of the day we're going to be adding in ourselves later. All kinds of interesting things. But notice how rather than just being able to navigate by clicking on links, you're also able to navigate by clicking on the site outline. And you can see how the site is structured. You'll see that it actually has a hierarchy. So there's the home page, but then within the home page we have geography units. And this is a page that contains other pages. We call that a container. And in fact, it's a container and then another nested container, because this one here, the 5 themes of geography, that also has multiple pages there, each with a little thumbnail. Audio, document locker, and then these ones are just individual pages, not containers holding other pages.
Hey Dan, can we take a question from the audience real quick?
Absolutely.
We had a question coming in asking about some of the different types of files that you can put in here, and we were talking about different audio files and text content. Can you show us a little bit about how to embed PDF files into your Sandvox document?
Right. So in fact, what I've just switched to here in his document locker is these are PDF. These are all PDF files. And so when someone is visiting this 5 Themes of Geography page, they would click on one of these links and it would take them to that PDF file.
Great. And when we're working with PDFs, do we have to worry about if we're putting them to the page or if we're going to have them opening up in another page?
Yeah, PDFs are a little different just because of the way that that depends on what browser you're using. I believe Safari now embeds them right in the web view all the time, as opposed to opening it as a separate document. Okay. So anyhow, I just wanted to give you, everyone listening here and watching, a sense that what you're seeing in Sandbox is very similar to what you're going to get on the actual final published website. So I think now is a good time to switch back to the website that we were starting to build up from the bottom up, and we can see how some of these items that Mr. Drazel has put onto his website, we might put onto our website as well. So I'm going to close this window for now and bring back the demo document. Okay. So as you can see, we've added a little bit of content to our website already. Let's bring in some more interesting content. One thing you might want to have for your classroom is a blog of some sort. Possibly you want to share with parents what it is that your class is up to, or maybe on a weekly basis or so, or perhaps you go on a multi-day field trip and you want to have a little update of what your class has been up to every day on this field trip, for example. So to make a blog, I'm going to go back to this new pop-up here. And instead of choosing just an empty page, I'm going to choose the preset called, aptly enough, blog. And what that has done in the site navigator, it's created a collection called blog, and it's automatically created the first post. So I'm going to replace that with some other text here, and I'll add a few more pages so you can see how a blog gets built up, because really a blog is just a collection of pages, but organized in such a way that it's reverse chronological order, so that the top contains the most recently added content. So I'm going to very quickly put in a little bit of text here, and I'm going to do some keyboard shortcuts for copying and paste because I want to get past this part quickly.
Dan, a question just came up asking how many pages can Sandvox hold? Is there a limit to what we can create?
You know, a very large number. We originally thought people were going to be making websites with a few dozen pages, but we have found people who have been creating websites with 1,000 and even more pages than that.
You know, I want to mention that when I was creating my TeacherCast site in Sandvox, I actually at one point in time had over 1,200 pages in Sandvox, and it was amazing, and it really was able to handle the high volume level of pages.
Yeah, we've been working nonstop on trying to come up with ways to speed it up and come up with even more efficient ways of having it open up and save and so on, because yeah, people like to create very large websites with lots of multimedia and so on.
Dan, one more question came in. It was about integrating Sandvox and PayPal.
Yes, I'm going to be showing off an example of putting in a chunk of HTML, and so what PayPal will give you when you create a button is they will give you a little chunk of HTML. They'll say, put this on your website. And so I don't think I have a chunk of PayPal, but I have some other chunks of HTML, and it's basically the same principle. So yes, we have many people who have used Sandbox and put in PayPal buttons on their website. So let me just show you here. I've created, if I can type this correctly, I've created these 3 pages with just some placeholder text. But as you can see, when I click on blog here in the site navigator, that you're noticing Earth, which was the one that I added the most recently, is at the top, and there's a little timestamp there, and astronomy, the middle one, and then the first one I made, the initial first post, Rule for Rocket Experimenters. And so that's really what a blog is. It's just a collection of pages. Even if you mentioned something about PDFs. If I had a PDF and I really wanted to include that PDF as the blog, I can grab that. I have a PDF here. I'm going to drag that over here into the site navigator, and it's highlighting blog. Drop it down here, and notice how it's just added this right into the site navigator. And if I click back on the blog index, I'll need a little blurb. What is this page all about? Uh,
Dan, can you demonstrate one more time slowly how to create a blog page?
sure. So here's my blog. It's selected. Let's make a new page. I go up here. I click New. And in this case, I just want a nice empty page because I'm going to be pasting some text into it. And there,
So really, Sandvox looks at a blog as just a collection of pages stacked on top of each other.
exactly. It's just a collection of pages. That's the magic of it. I think that rather than being something like I'm going to create some sort of special blog page, a blog is really just a collection. A blog already it knows about all these things like RSS feeds and so on. So when you use the preset, it's handy because it automatically sorts them in the correct date order and so on. But now our blog has these now 5 entries in it, including the Untitled one we just made. So something else you might want to add to your website. If I go back to the home page, you'll see we have the home, the grade reports. There's our blog. We can also add a photo album. Let's say, for example, that your class went on a field trip. I have some photos from Washington, D.C. that I can use as an example. In this case, I'm going to open up our media browser. Now, if you have iPhoto or a pictures folder with some digital photos in it, the media browser is a great way to access those bits of media without having to leave Sandvox and go to a different program and drag them in. You just do it right from Sandvox. So in this case, I have a number of photos here in the media browser. I'm just going to select all of them. And I'm going to drag them into my page here. It's showing me an example. And just instantly, what it's done is it's created a nice little grid, little album here with it's scaled down all the images to give you nice thumbnail size images here. And also, if you notice on the left in the site navigator, it's created an individual page for each one of these photos. It's picked up the file names in this case. When there's a useful file name, we might want to rename these later. Actually, let me just fix this one of the Jefferson Memorial, for instance. Like that. You notice it's changed the title there. And if you want to actually look at these photos, you would click on one of the links, click on one of the thumbnails, and it would take you right to that page with the photo. Normally, you probably would be hopefully watching this on a slightly taller screen, so you wouldn't have to scroll down like I'm doing here. But you can page from photo to photo, and so on. But there's a really cool thing we added to Sandvox 2, which came out last year, which I wanted to show you, and that is a nicer way to navigate through a photo album. So in this case, I've just clicked on the index. It gave me a nice little outline around it to show that I'm focused on this particular object. And with the inspector, I can choose this last segment. And this last segment is really properties that are specific to whatever object it is you have selected. And I can just turn on gallery. So I'll click on this checkbox here. And now, when I come back over here, when I'm visiting this and I click on one of these links, in this case, I click here, and it's going to pop up a new layer. I'll get this out of the way. Pop up a nice little slideshow on a new layer, and you'll see that your old site, your page with your thumbnails is still in the background there, but I can now page through my photos from DC and Mount Vernon.
Hey Scott, how does Sandvox actually know what the titles of the images are?
So Sandvox is grabbing the titles as well as it can. So if you have a title and caption and so on in iPhoto, then Sandvox is going to pick that. If they're just coming from files, in this case, it'll try to pick it from the file name. So we've added several things now. I'll click these disclosure triangles here just to get these out of the way. But you'll see we've started to add several interesting kinds of pages to our website. Now what I'd like to do is to show off some interesting objects that you can add to a page. When we were taking that little tour of the different websites, there were lots of interesting things besides just photos and text that we saw on the pages.
Scott, can we throw one more question in here from the audience?
Please do.
There's a question coming in here, Scott. Is it possible to embed other third-party photo applications such as Flickr?
We actually have a way to embed Flickr, but it's really more of it's not a full-size Flickr thing. It's more of Flickr doesn't actually provide a way to embed a slideshow from Flickr into a website, although I have seen some clever third-party people that have added that. We haven't been able to figure out the right solution for that. But there is a nice thing we can add to the sidebar. I'll go ahead and just jump ahead, actually. And this is our objects menu. I was about to start showing you things here. And notice that it's actually longer than will fit on this window here. But these are all pre-built objects that are very easy to add to your Sandvox website, and they can end up either in the sidebar over there on the right in this case, or as main content. So for Flickr thumbnails, we might have, I've just chosen that one. Let's let it load for a minute from the internet because it has to get these thumbnails. There we go. So here's a nice little set of thumbnails. So if you have a set of photos that you've maintained in Flickr, you can set it up to attach to your account or a particular tag, and you can view those. You can view those thumbnails there. Clicking on them would then take you to the Flickr page for that photo. So that's useful for.
One more question here, Scott. Can you show us how to add a second photo album?
Yes, absolutely. So we have. I'll just add a new photo album, and maybe we want to call this one. What would be something like that, and put in some more photos. And I'll just use the one example there. But yeah, so multiple photo albums. We actually have some people who do photo albums of photo albums, nested multiple times. So you'll have one photo album is showing you the thumbnails of the photo album that you want to link to. So it's kind of mind-blowing, but some people have stretched Sandbox in ways that I hadn't really thought of. You can also use a photo album just as a way of indexing pages of videos. So for instance, you might want to, you might have a grid like what we see here, but rather than showing individual photos, it would take you to actual movies. So let's get back to adding a few more interesting things to our web pages. So I've chosen this Untitled page because it's essentially empty, and we can add a few interesting objects to it. So one of the websites you might have noticed it has some social media integration. Let's say that you're a Twitter user, and maybe as a teacher you want to use Twitter to keep parents apprised of what your class is up to. Or possibly you have a unit that you want to talk about something else that's happening in the world. And so for instance, something that's very topical right now is the Mars Curiosity. So if I choose Twitter, this is going to add an object over to the sidebar here, and I'll use the inspector, and I'll just tell it that I want to see what are the tweets from Mars Curiosity. And here we have it. This is the latest tweets directly from Mars Curiosity. And one of the nice things about bringing in external content like Twitter and like some of the news feeds I'm going to be showing shortly is that even if you haven't updated your website lately, maybe you only get a chance to do it every week or every couple of weeks, someone visiting your site, if you put in some of this dynamic content that comes in from other parts of the web, they're going to see something that's brand new and the latest. So they're going to come to your site and they're going to see a tweet that in this case was just posted 3 minutes ago, even if you didn't actually update your site with the rest of the content, for the last few days or weeks. So that's kind of fun. Another thing that's handy to put onto a website is videos, let's say from YouTube. So let's say, for instance, so I'm going back to here, choose YouTube. In this case, I had the sidebar selected. I really want this to go on the main body, so let's do that. And make it a little bigger. So this one needs a URL of a YouTube video. So keeping with the geography theme, I'm going to go to a YouTube page here. And here's a video about Tristan da Cunha, one of my favorite remote places in the world. Drag this over here. And now here's our video. And we can play this.
Scott, we have a question here about embedding your own videos. The question was, what happens if we have our own movies? Can we put them directly into Sandvox? And I was giving the answer that it's probably better if you upload your videos into YouTube and create them, and then from YouTube embed them. rather than just directly putting them into
Right.
Sandbox to save you time. What do you suggest?
That's true. Yeah, that's handy. You may have other reasons why you want to put your own videos on there. What we recommend is that you export it in such a way that is iPhone and iPad friendly. It's a format called H.264 MP4. That usually, if you just export it for iPad, then that's the right way to do it. And you can drag that uh, right onto your website. I don't have a video handy. I do have an audio, which is a similar concept. Um, you might want to, audio or video. We drag this in, and the nice thing is that because different browsers have different capabilities, the way it works for audio and for video is that if the visitor is using a browser, a modern browser like Safari, Chrome, or let's say they're using something like an iPhone or an iPad, they're going to get the fancy new HTML5 video format that, because there are certain kinds of video formats and players that you can't actually use on an iPhone and an iPad. So the nice thing is that it is compatible with the iOS. But then as a fallback, in case the visitor is using a browser that doesn't understand this modern way of embedding videos, or maybe they don't understand the H.264 video format, it has as a fallback, it will use a Flash-based player. So if you're using IE or something like that, you can still see the video, you can still listen to the audio, even if it doesn't understand the modern thing. So we're very happy with that because it's just, you don't have to worry about that. Just give us the right video format, drag it in, and then you're set. So another interesting object I could do, I'm going to actually create a new, I'll just make a new page here again, so it's not cluttering up this page. And that would be a contact form, like what we saw on Mr. Drazel's site. So again, using the objects pop-up, choose one of these, in this case, contact form. Now, the nice thing about using a contact form, rather than putting your email address onto your website, is that this way the spammers aren't able to find your email address and harvest it and start sending you spam or more spam. Also, maybe you don't want to expose your email address directly to your students, so you want to give them a way for them to contact you, but without actually having your email address available. So I'm going to use the inspector here. I'm just going to type in a fake email address because I don't really need to use the real thing here. And notice that there's a form where people can fill in their name, their email, the subject of the message, and then the message itself. One thing that's really handy if you want is you can actually customize that even more. So let's say, for example, that you wanted to have a grade report, a grade request, let's say, and you want to put in some sort of a field that they would fill into, what is their student ID, so you can verify that it's really them that they're requesting. So we can just add a new field in the inspector here, and I'm just going to call it student ID. And now there's a new field that someone's going to need to fill in. Something else that's kind of fun. Let's say that you have you want it so that the subject of the message, rather than having them type it in, maybe you have a few predefined kinds of subjects you can use to categorize what the emails are coming in from. So let's click on subject here, and rather than making it a text field, I'm going to change it to be a pop-up. And notice it's showing something there. I'm going to paste in some choices, homework, grade request, and other, let's say. And now, when someone comes to this website, they're going to be able to choose what kind of message this is. Okay, let's go back to adding something that was on Mr. Drazel's original website. He had a really cool feature called Earth image of the. Oh, no, let's see. I'm not going to show that one now. Let's do a little syndication. On one of his history sites, he had a really cool little feature called Today in History.
Dan, we have a few more questions here. One person is asking about the contact form, and can they ask their kids to send them files through their website?
That is not actually supported in Sandvox because we're basically relaying a message that's just the text message. It's being posted through the web to our server, and then we send it as an email. So unfortunately, we don't have any way to have files being sent. I believe there are some third-party websites that give you a chunk of HTML that you can embed onto your website, where someone can drop or choose a file. Some of the file sending services, I can't remember exactly in the offhand. So that's what I would suggest if that's what they're looking for. Okay. So back to the homepage. I wanted to bring in a feature of something that was shown off in the one of Mr. Drazel's websites. I think it was a history site, and that was a RSS syndicated RSS feed. Now, RSS stands for really simple syndication, and the idea is that websites can provide content. It might be a blog, or it might be just some daily updated content that can then be syndicated and put onto other websites. So I'm just going to use the inspector and paste in the URL that I have, and there it is. This is what, today in history, something like that. Okay. And maybe I only want to show one item, so it's just going to show one thing that happened in history. Okay. We've shown adding some audio, and I see we're getting we're getting close to running out of time. So I don't want to spend too much time on a few of these things. One thing I do want to mention, I think is really important, is the HTML object. In a lot of cases, we have, as you see, a large number of items that are pre-built items that you might want to put onto your website, but you may get you may find from some other source on the web say, hey, here's a chunk of HTML. Put this onto your website, and then you can embed our content onto your website. Really, really powerful concept. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to I'll start with an empty text page again. And in this case, I'm going to add a raw HTML object. Now, the really cool thing is that you don't have to understand or know anything about HTML. But if you're given a piece of HTML, this is where to put it. So I have, for example, a chunk of HTML that came from SlideShare, a really great online learning site. And just paste that in and watch what it loads up. And there it is. There's a slideshow that you've just embedded. Now it's on your website. Something else that you might find useful, I'm going to put something that was also on Mr. Drazel's site. I'll add a new raw HTML object and open up the editor for that. And here is, I'm going to bring in this Earth image of the day. Again, very nice for a geography site. So there it is. That's the same thing that we saw over on the actual live website. And actually, Google provides hundreds and hundreds of what they call gadgets, little bits of code that you can put onto your website to give it some really interesting dynamic content. So I think it's probably a good time for us to maybe jump into some questions. One thing I do want to mention, one bridge that we haven't actually crossed here, that's an issue you definitely want to think about, is that in building a website, you're going to have to actually get it published onto the web so that your website can be seen by parents and students and colleagues and so on. And a lot of teachers with a Mac used to use their MobileMe account for publishing their website. But since Apple pulled the plug on MobileMe a couple months ago, that means that people have had to find another place on the internet to publish their site. Now, fortunately, Sandvox allows you to publish to just about any one of the thousands of web hosting companies out there. And Sandvox makes it pretty easy to do. So if you have a web host that you like and you want to use, hey, you're going to be set. If you're looking for a host, there is a company that we've been partnering with for about 4 years. They're called A2 Hosting. And if you want to find out about them, you can get to their Sandvox hosting page. The URL, I'll have it at the very end, but it's Karelia.com, Karelia.com/A2. And whatever host you choose, they'll give you some details about what you need to publish your web host or publish your website. You'll set that up in Sandvox. And then every time you've made some changes to your website that you want the world to see, you would go up here and click on the Publish button, and anything that has changed since you last published will be transmitted from your Mac to your web host, and then it'll be live on the internet.
Dan, just a couple more questions. We have a lot of them coming in here from our chat log. Can you talk to us more about the contact form and how we can change the name of the or the email address that the contact form goes to?
Let's go back here and bring up that one with the contact form inspector right here. So you're just going to choose the last segment because that's the object that's selected. Choose the message tab, not the fields tab. That was the customizing. But whoops, I focused too deeply here.
Thanks, Dan. There's a lot of questions coming in about taking Sandvox to that next level and really being customizable with it. Could you show us a little bit about how you take some of those embedded things, open up the HTML, and really manipulate the content that's on your website?
Right. So let's say, for instance, if I can find where I put this, the slide share video. Where is that? Here it is. So I'm going to select the slide share video, or the slide share presentation, and edit raw HTML. So here's the HTML that they gave us. If you do want to get, hold your breath and be brave and so on, you can actually edit that HTML. So in this case, for instance, they have hardwired this particular thing to be 427 by 356. So if I wanted to change this to something that's more appropriate, actually I'm going to make it a little smaller. So let's say you want something by 300 by 200 or something like that. Update preview, and notice how it's made a smaller version of that. There's even a button called, I was just going to mention there's even a button called Tidy HTML, makes the HTML a little bit more readable. Again, this is not for the faint of heart. I don't really recommend. I'm not trying to encourage people to go in there and dig into their HTML, but it is possible.
Thanks for that one, Dan. Here's another question that comes in about hosting. A customer here wants to know, is it possible to upload your Sandbox site to a locally hosted site on your computer, say?
Yes, actually you can. It's a little tricky now if you're using Mountain Lion because Mountain Lion took out the ability for you to turn on local hosting to your website. We actually have, yeah. So you can still host to your own you can still host on your own Mac, but they just took out the controls, the button to turn it on, essentially. It's really too bad. That's in Mountain Lion. Sometimes they take things out. But it is possible if you go to our help pages. We have about 200 pages of help that's available either through the help menu or online. That actually will give you a suggestion of a third-party freeware that you can download if you want to enable web hosting on your own machine. Once you get that enabled, then yes, it is very easy to publish right onto your own on your own Mac as well. Yes.
You know, Dan, now that we have the website at this point, could you show us again how to change it if we wanted to go to, say, a different color, or maybe even show us what a different theme would look like now that we have the website at this point?
I just changed this to brown and green. In this case, it's laid out a bit differently. The sidebar is on the left. The banner goes above the title area. So each design is laid out slightly differently, just the vision that the designer had for what that was going to look like. But the content is all carries over from one design to the other.
You know, Dan, I want to say thank you one more time for doing this great webinar with us. It's certainly our first one, but won't be our last. Some of the people here asking questions of where do we go to get more information on Sandvox? Where do we get a hold of Corellia? And what are some of the websites that you've brought up? Could you show us that slide, please, with all the different websites, and talk to us a little bit about where we can find more information?
So it's just Sandvox. Actually, there's also one for Corellia, K-A-R-E-L-I-A, but we're starting to move over to use Sandvox for Sandvox-related things. And there's also a number of URLs here that we'll just leave this slide up for a while at the end.